You're listening to Demand and Disrupt, the podcast for information about accessibility, advocacy, and all things disability.
Welcome to Demand and Disrupt, a disability podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Parsley.
Hey, Kimberly, you just might know me. I'm Sam Moore.
Hey, Sam, how are things going?
Oh, I can't complain a bit, except for, Kimberly, I'm kind of sweating bullets over here because I'm worried I might be in potential trouble with the law.
What have you done now?
Don't tell anybody. But I got a text a few days ago saying that I have an outstanding toll that must be paid by the end of the month. And if I don't pay, then my vehicle registration will be suspended.
Oh, well, now, Sam, what have you been doing?
Well, I mean, my best guess is that this refers to the Hot Wheels. I don't know if I ever told you, but for my 16th birthday, Mom and Dad got me Hot Wheels. And Dad was like, well, son, we can't say that you can't say that we never bought you a car.
There you go. That's
so cute. But I tell you, if this Hot Wheel registration gets revoked, I'm really up a creek, Kimberly.
I believe, Sam, I got a similar text saying the same
now
thing.
The truth comes out.
Now, you don't think this could be a scam, do you?
Oh, of course not. I mean, I think, for me, it's a Hot Wheels. I don't know what kind of rolling device that you have that it's referring to, but I know you got one, and you're probably just keeping it secret and, not telling me.
It was one thing when the scammers were telling me that several people had recommended my resume to this place for me to get a job. That was one thing. I was like, this seems suspect at best. But now they're telling me that I was driving and ran through a toll booth, which, okay, if I was driving, I probably would run through a toll booth, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't and didn't. So
I wonder if our friend Lisa got a similar text.
I wonder if she did. How is our friend Lisa McKingsley?
Oh, well, far as I know, pretty good. I had a great conversation with her just the other day that we posted on my my other podcast, which is Blabbing in the Bluegrass. And we talked about her new venture into the massage therapy world. She just started practicing not long ago, and of course finished her schooling in December. And so you can tune in there and find out all about the steps she took to start her practice and the services she offers. It's right there in Bowling Green. So if you live in that area, or even if you don't, it's well worth the drive to get to her. Only thing I forgot to ask her about that text. So I guess I'm going to have to follow up with her, Kimberly.
Yeah, you're going to have to. I'm sure I will put a link to that interview that you did with her in the show notes. Lots of people wondering how Lisa's doing and what she's been up to. I have not gone to see her at her massage studio. I got to think back and think, is there any chance I really made her mad or pissed her off when she was working here? Because before I let her go, do a massage on me, I really want to make sure that we're on real good terms. So.
Well, I don't think you have anything to worry about there. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. Even if she did have some beef with you, Kimberly, I think if you paid her, she'd get over it.
It just depends on how much I pay her, right?
Oh, goodness. But yeah, I'd like to give her some business sometime too. So I'm going to have to hitch a ride down there.
There you go. There you go.
My Hot Wheels one.
Yeah, you'll have to come down here. We're right here between Mother's Day and Father's Day. Lots going on with that. So did you do anything special for your mom?
I did. Yeah, she's worth it. Don't tell her I said that because she'll get the big head. But I got her an Olive Garden gift card, Kimberly, because that's one of her favorite places. And so I got her one of those, and I tell you, we both enjoyed it because she was kind enough to let me help her use it. And how did you all celebrate Mother's Day, Kimberly?
Well, we got my mom some flowers, and she didn't really want to go out to dinner. She just, with the crowds and stuff, she just didn't. So we went to her house and we brought her flowers, and she cooked for, I guess, us and me, since I'm a mom.
So you made the long trek from Warren County to Butler County.
No, my mom actually lives here in Warren County now. I made the long trek about 3 miles down the road. So,
that's right. I forgot she lives in Bowling Green now, or Warren County.
She does, and we had a good time. We ate, and we played games. We just played some board games and stuff.
Oh, that's cool. That's good family bonding time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And now my kids, did I tell you this? What they got me for Mother's Day?
No, what they get you?
A magnetic dartboard.
A magnet, not just any dartboard, a magnetic
it's
dartboard.
Magnetic. So I can't hurt anybody or anything. There's no sharp points. It's magnetic.
A magnetic dartboard.
Yes. How about that?
Yeah, you're probably in heaven with that thing, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. We do have fun with that. Yep.
And now, we're getting to the point that we're right about halfway between Mother's Day and Father's Day.
Yep, we are.
And so that's Father's Day's coming up. And my dad passed away in 2019. He was a great one. But I think Mom and I have decided that, to celebrate him and the life well lived that he had, she and I are going to go to one of his favorite places to eat.
I think that is, that's so sweet, Sam. That is a wonderful way to remember your dad. I think that's wonderful. I bet he would like that.
There were several around here that he liked. A few of them are local places that, here in the Henderson area that maybe not everybody would be familiar with, but pretty much any Tex-Mex place or steakhouse, Dad was generally all over it. So it'll probably be something along those lines.
Wow. Well, that's great. That sounds great. What else in terms of all the days is we have lots of graduations.
I'm gonna start. I've got Pomp and Circumstance stuck in my head now. But
yes, my son Ian did not graduate. He's a junior, but he had to go to the graduation at Bowling Green High. He's in the orchestra. He plays the cello. So he said he played Pomp and Circumstance 10 times and has never been so bored in his life. So.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, he probably had that stuck in his head for at least a few nights. But anyhow, you yourself went to a graduation last week too, didn't you?
I did. My baby girl, who does not like to be called that, but Sayer, graduated from 8th grade.
She'll always be your baby.
She will, whether she likes it or not. She will be. I have 2 high schoolers now.
High schoolers now, a freshman and a senior as of August.
Exactly. Well, she's already started. They Bowling Green High offers a program for a summer class for kids who are heavy into the arts, like Sayers in band and choir, so they can get their PE credit, their PE and health credit out of the way in the summer. So she started.
So she's doing a little summer school.
Yep. She started this past Tuesday on the May 27th. She went ahead and started doing her summer to get her PE and health credit out of the way. And
so she is a freshman.
She is a freshman.
However you slice it. And let's give a shout out to your niece. You were telling me that she graduated as well.
She will. She graduates tomorrow. My niece, Lily Grace, will graduate tomorrow from Edmonson County High.
Edmonson County. Okay.
Yes. And she's going to be, I think she's going to Western for nursing. So
how about that?
And she's
always
smart.
a demand for nursing.
I know. And Lily Grace is smart and brilliant and all those things. So yeah, it's just been it's a busy time of year, isn't it?
Yay, Lily!
Yeah. So this week, my interview guest is Leigh McKingsley, and she is the let me see if I get this right. It's a long title. Senior Director for Disability and Criminal Justice with the arc of the United States.
You pulled it off, Kimberly.
I think I did. I hope so. So I'm going to talk to her about criminal justice stuff and how the criminal justice system intersects with people with disabilities. And just want to give a little content warning. We are, unfortunately, we're going to discuss the death of a autistic male at the hands of police. So if that is something that is hard for you to hear, hard for you to listen to, you may want to sit this one out. Come back to us next time, but mainly just take care of yourself.
Exactly.
Those
you love.
And those you love, exactly. So there's a lot of good information here. She gives a lot of good information, but those things can be hard to hear, hard to listen to. So just do what you have to do to take care of your own well-being. And but I hope if you listen, you enjoy it, you learn something. And so here is my interview with Leigh McKingsley. Welcome to Demand and Disrupt, a disability podcast. And I am pleased to introduce Leigh McKingsley. And Leigh is the Senior Director of Disability and Justice Initiatives with the ARC of the United States. Hello, Leigh. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on today.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. This is going to be a fascinating conversation. So let me begin by asking you, what is the ARC and how did it get started?
So the ARC is probably well known by some, at least in the disability community, but maybe not for those who are not in the disability community. But the ARC of the United States has been around for 75 years and was started by parents who said no to institutional living. Back in those days, doctors were actually recommending for families to send their children to institutions to live. And parents were uprising and saying, no, we want our children with us. We believe they can learn. We want them in schools. And that is really the foundation of the ARC, a family-driven organization that really sought the best life possible for their children with disabilities.
I did not realize that fight went back that far.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, it's the same fight that we continue, right? For even basic services. And as you'll hear later around criminal justice issues as well. But we have about 550 chapters throughout the country. So there may be one near you. We always like to say we have both state and local chapters. So the states really focus on policy change. And then our local chapters are there providing advocacy and then direct support.
And that support is for people with all kinds of disabilities. Is that correct?
Okay, so thank you for stating that. We focus on intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Okay.
So anything that falls under that umbrella, yeah. So, that could include autism, or it could include anyone with a type of an intellectual disability that has no specific diagnosis. And then all of the different types of developmental disabilities as well.
Wonderful. So if someone is interested in seeing if there is a chapter near them, how might they go about doing that?
They could actually go to our website. It's basically thearc.org. And we have a search engine there that you can look up, where is my chapter? So you can find it based on state and easily find the nearest one, the one closest to you that way.
Okay. And of course, I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And that is the ARC, ARC. And can you tell me about the name, sort of where the name comes from?
Sure. Yeah. So years ago, we were still using the word retarded. And so it originally stood for the Association for Retarded Citizens. Then it moved to, I think, retarded children. And now, of course, we don't use that term because of the amount of stigma around it. So there was a big debate on should the ARC change completely, but then it was so well known and entrenched in communities that there was a fear of losing the name. So now we just go by the ARC. We're very
Okay.
stern about not using capital A, capital R, capital C for that reason.
I
And
see.
so we
Okay,
go
great.
by small r, small c, just to say we're still here as the ARC, but of course, the language has definitely changed, and we're very happy about that.
I need to ask you about something terrible that has recently happened and that the ARC is working on. Can you tell me about Victor Perez?
Yes, so Victor Perez was a 17-year-old individual with autism who was also nonverbal and had other disabilities as well. Police were called because it looked like he needed some de-escalation. I think a neighbor actually called police. And once police got there, the situation evolved really quickly, and it ended up with Victor being shot multiple times, and he later died in the hospital. And it's just an incredibly tragic situation that should not have happened. And sadly, his story is not the only one like this. We actually, in another case, in another state, supported an individual with autism who was 16 and also died while his parents were with him. And he died due to asphyxiation when he was being held down. The mother had said, "My son can't breathe," and yet they continued to hold him down and he passed away. So again and again, we are seeing these terribly tragic situations that could be prevented. And even in this case, with the Victor Perez case, the mother, not the mother, but one of the family members that did talk to police about it, she was quoted as saying, "The police didn't even ask what the situation was when they arrived. They didn't listen. They didn't even hesitate to shoot." And if you see the video, which it's been all over the news, then you can see that Victor was behind a fence. And there's serious questions about why the shooting occurred in the first place, and what was going on in terms of any kind of de-escalation, because it looked like there wasn't any. So Victor's story is another example of how desperately we have to change how we're doing policing and how we're doing crisis response in our country.
And so tell me, what is the ARC doing in terms of helping with that effort?
So I've been at the ARC for 29 years, really focused on this intersection of people becoming involved in the criminal justice system, either as victims or suspects or citizens that are just encountering police. And through those many, many years, there was a hope to create a center that would really focus on these issues, because we saw over and over that while there was some focus on mental health issues or mental illness, there wasn't really a space to have that conversation around intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we were able to get a grant 11 years ago to start the ARC's National Center on Criminal Justice and Disability, and that's the center I oversee. And we do a number of different projects, including law enforcement training, to address some of these key issues.
And you said you go to conferences with, is it chiefs of police? Is that right?
Yeah, so one of the partners that we work with pretty closely is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or for short, we say IACP, and they're the largest membership organization of police in the country. And we currently have a grant with them that has pretty much taken the kind of basic CIT training, what is called crisis intervention teams, and taken that training and added more to it to include more on intellectual developmental disabilities. So there is some training out there for police currently, but I was so happy to be involved in a PBS special recently where I brought up this key point about just how often police are getting training. And we know that no more than in 20 states is law enforcement required to get training on intellectual and developmental disabilities. And training on this topic is really haphazard. It's not standardized across police agencies. So that means that some officers will get some training, but others won't. And it really leaves too much to chance when it comes to calls involving people with disabilities. So we're working with folks like IACP and others in the policing community to say, what can we do differently? And also, the training is not necessarily mandatory everywhere, like I said. And even in places where it is, it's not standardized. So how do I know if I'm, having a situation? How do I know if I can call police? We usually tell folks, make sure you find out who your local police is. Go there ahead of time. Get to know people as much as you can, because really you don't know exactly what will happen if you call police or if a neighbor calls, what kind of response you might get. Some officers are absolutely wonderful. They know exactly what to do. Maybe they haven't even had that much training, but they have a different sense of how to de-escalate. But that's not true among everyone.
No, no. I was recently involved in a meeting with a police officer with a consumer organization that I'm a part of. And you're correct. The officer did say, reach out to us. Tell us what we need to know.
Yes.
The more you do that, the more information we have, the better. Tell us if what your needs are, how we can help. And a lot of times they are looking for citizens to help train. So, what else? I mean, overall, are you finding that police officers and police forces are receptive to information and training?
I feel like I'm a little biased in answering that because I'm working with folks that already kind of reached out to us. So it's hard for me to answer that, I think as honestly as I can, or knowing what I know. But from the people that we've worked with, yes, there does seem to be a growing desire to understand, say, autism, for example. That does seem to be one that more people will ask about, because now in our society, it's talked about much more than, say, just if you just said IDD,
Right.
So
Right.
there seems to be more on that front. And I think just with society becoming more knowledgeable about autism, for example, or maybe other types of developmental disabilities, that has impacted law enforcement. And say they have a child with a disability, or they may have been diagnosed with certain kinds of conditions. And that just makes it so much easier to have these conversations, because then they're bringing their own lived experience into it. And that's what's really exciting about the work that we're doing at the center, is whether we're using our own training, we have what's called our Pathways to Justice training, or we're working with the police agencies around crisis response training. We are always bringing the message that you must have people with lived experience involved in training as co-trainers, bringing them into this as equal as they would a police officer, to provide really crucial information about things like de-escalation. Because if you don't have the lived experience at the table, then you're really missing what could actually change attitudes and minds.
Right. And that's true of every area of disability justice, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But it still gets missed, and it takes time. It takes having people to know who to reach out to. And in the disability field, there's still a lot of work to do to provide that foundation, and kind of what is the pathway for someone with a disability to become an advocate in this space, to know how to use their voice, to craft their story. What are the key things they care about in this topic? And so that's what we're looking to do as well whenever we're providing training or thinking about how to create response teams and communities around this issue. We're thinking about how does that voice not get lost? because the reality is within the justice system, people with IDD are pretty much invisible. Sometimes their disabilities aren't visible, first of all, but even when they are, this topic doesn't seem to reach much urgency until there is a Victor Perez.
Right.
And then even that sense of urgency doesn't seem to last long enough to see that long-term change.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you suggest that individuals do aside from maybe find their local chapter of the ARC to help to learn advocacy and things? What if someone is in a situation where they feel like they may at some point need to involve the police? What advice can you give them?
Well, I'll go back and reiterate what I said before, which is don't wait till there's a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely want to get to know your local police department, your local officers. If there is a way, most police departments have some type of community-based policing initiatives where you can get involved with what they're doing. And if you can kind of show forth some goodwill in that way and show interest in what what they're doing, what their job is like, going on a ride along is what it's called, where you ride with an officer to kind of get an idea of what their job is like. That can really help build that relationship between families or a person with a disability who wants to understand their world. I think it's about getting into each other's worlds and building that understanding and trust. And then you could talk more about, okay, what kind of training are you providing on this? And when's the last time that's been updated? And can we take a look at it? And how are you involving people with disabilities in that training? So creating that groundwork and then talking about how you can be proactive together about this work, and then just making sure that if you had to make a call or a neighbor had to make a call, that you could feel comfortable doing that.
What are some other disability initiatives that you're working on? Because you're not busy enough at all with what you're doing already.
Well, I will say you never get bored in this space. I can guarantee you that. And we have quite a few projects right now. And one of the things that when we started this center that was a must is that we have to look at all sides of this issue. Now, the data that we do have shows that people with IDD are overrepresented in the center, or in the criminal justice system, excuse me, as both victims and suspects and defendants. So we have data from the National Crime Victim Survey showing just how often people with disabilities are victimized. And it's specifically people with cognitive disabilities face the greatest risk of victimization. But we also have data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics to show us just how often people with different types of disabilities are in our prisons and jails. So because we have that data, we do know this is a significant issue, and we want to focus on both of those issues. Not saying that one is more important than the other, because people are often experiencing both sides of this when they have disabilities. And so some of the different types of projects that we're working on to address that is police training. So we have a project right now where we're working with the COPS office to create what's called Just Policing. And it will be an online training for police with IDD that's focused on IDD. And in that training, we're also looking at, when people with disabilities also are marginalized in other ways, and making sure that we're thinking about the whole person as a police officer would approach someone. And so we're working on that. We also have one through the Office of Violence Against Women, looking at language access barriers to justice among victims with IDD. And we're looking specifically at people who use assistive technology, who don't use spoken language to communicate, on how would they report a crime? What are the barriers there, and what tools can we create around that? And so that's been really interesting to hear from a number of surveys that we've done now to hear from people, whether they're victims, survivors, or they're in police agencies or in victim advocacy spaces, getting more information about what we're missing and what we need to be doing better. I had mentioned the crisis response training, so we're working with IACP on that. There's a new project we started on interviewing people with IDD. So we know that people are much more likely to give false forced confessions, and looking at why our current way of interviewing people doesn't work that have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so by bringing together people with lived experience, police, interrogators, and looking at how do we change things, what kinds of guidelines do we need to make sure that we're getting to the truth and not just forcing people to say things that really aren't true. So that's some of it. We do some international work as well. I'm part of an Access to Justice International Knowledge Hub and have been doing more work with folks in Ireland. There's some really interesting work going on around communication specialists that help ensure that people with disabilities have access to communication and can be heard and understood in courts and in the justice system. So a lot of great things going on.
Those are some incredible initiatives you've got going. I mean, I consider myself an advocate for people with disabilities, but I have never considered some of those questions before.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
it's amazing to me the kind of work you all are doing. So thank you so much for doing that work.
Well, thank you.
Now, what are the biggest challenges right now that the disability community is facing in terms of disability justice?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that question. I think one of the key challenges is pretty obvious right now with the current federal administration that is really slashing some key funding, right, for many programs. And I'm seeing this, how it's impacting, say, victims. So just all victims, but think about if you're a victim with a disability, how much more difficult it can be just to get key services. These are supports and services that people with disabilities rely on. I'm seeing, even in the policing field, money getting cut for helping officers with their mental wellness. Well, that's not going to help anyone. Like, we need officers to have mental health
Right.
care, right? So
Right.
it seems like everywhere we're turning, even the project we have on the Office of Violence Against Women, we were hoping to continue to build on that work. But of course, there's no RFP out. There's no request for proposals out, so we can't apply to continue that work. So that, I think, is, of course, the biggest challenge at this moment. And once you can't get even basic needs like Medicaid met, then you can't get to those underlying issues too that maybe are not as talked about, like criminal justice issues. So we have to make sure that all of these needs are getting met in the community. But there's other things like threats to the Americans with Disabilities Act that ensure access to justice for people with disabilities by making sure they have the accommodations they need. So under Title II of ADA, that speaks specifically to policing, any kind of state and local government service, that people must have access so that anyone with a disability can access the justice system just as someone without a disability. So there's concern, of course, that we can continue ensuring and building case law around that to know that people with disabilities do have a way to fight back if they're not getting the accommodations that the law says they should get. And I mentioned before too that I think there's still just a general problem of this population being invisible in the criminal justice system, or maybe people don't quite understand how the disability is impacting that when they come in contact with police, or when they end up in a situation where they don't even understand how they got there. Maybe they were used by someone else. They're like, think about online crimes, right? There's a lot of concern around people being on child pornography sites. Now, how did that happen? How are they getting educated on sex ed? How do they understand all of these really complicated things that, if not provided education and understanding, anybody could end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I think for people with IDD, that's happening more than we realize. And the reason we know that is because we're getting the phone calls. We have a national INR line for anyone to contact us if they're in a situation where they need support. And so we hear the things going on every day, right? Where a parent didn't know that they, you know, that they could have called us to get help talking to the police, or they didn't know that their son or daughter who was raped, that they wouldn't be seen as credible. So they need support on how do we address that. So there's all these kinds of issues. And I think the biggest challenge is just building capacity, because we're only a small center of just 2 full-time staff.
Oh,
And
wow.
you know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
we got to build capacity in our local chapters of the ARC, at the Autism Society, like wherever, there's fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. We see a lot of issues in that area too, so that there can be more advocates in this space to provide that.
Mhm. So you mentioned the line that people can reach out to. Do you want to give some information about that?
Sure. So, well, if you go to our website, which is thearc.org, we also have a place there where you can look up programs and supports, and we're under criminal justice.
Okay. So we talked about some of the challenges. I'm wondering if there have been any recent victories that have been a result of the ARC and the work from the disability community.
So I think that there has been stronger relationships between police and disability community, at least through the work that we've been able to do working with IACP. We've also worked with the National Policing Institute and some others. We've seen strong desire from both sides to really address this. And we've been able to work sort of from the inside to build that trust. And then we get to some of the harder conversations, say about use of force, for example. And so if we can have this conversation right at the national level, how can we replicate that at the state, at the local level as well? And that's what we're doing through things like the CRIT training. I think a victory would be the fact that we're having a whole new level of conversation around this. I mean, when I first started many years ago, I remember we couldn't even say that everyone should go home safe in these trainings. You pretty much had to say, okay, police need to go home. The police would say, we need to go home at night. So basically, our safety is everything. And so
Really?
now we're at a place, well, it's everyone's safety. We
Mm-hmm.
have to think, how does everyone go home at night? And in bringing in that lived experience, there's much more desire for that. So that I think that that's been a victory. We've also seen more awareness, as I said before, thanks to just a general awareness of disability. So, now there's all these shows now in the media about autism, and I think there's just a familiarity about it in general.
Representation is important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was just at a policing conference this week and was talking about, of course, the training and what different types of police training are out there. And we were actually talking about virtual reality and how to create scenarios involving people with IDD, making sure that their voices are involved when we're creating virtual reality scenarios. And one of the individuals, when I had asked a question, said that his partner, who is an officer, has autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, so I know a lot more about this than probably most people here because I have this personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
So we always say, I see more victories happening at that, in the community when we can come together with these shared experiences. And I'm seeing that happen even at the national level, and how that can create much more authentic communication, more honest conversations that can lead to really informed policy changes and legislation as well. So I think that's kind of been exciting. And again, I do want to state that this is not like, this did not happen overnight. I've been in the field for almost 30 years, working with the same organizations and building that kind of trust and credibility as they've had to build with me. You really have to keep that trust front and center as we think about how we're ensuring that everybody is safe. And that's a key message, I think.
Right. Everybody, to make sure everyone is safe. Yeah. So I'll say again, thank you for the hard work that you do and have been doing for nearly 30 years. And last question, what can we all do as individuals? What can we all do to advance disability justice?
Oh, well, I would love for folks to get to know what we're doing at the ARC and at the National Center on Criminal Justice and Disability. We have a newsletter that folks can sign up for. And we like to highlight like Victor's case, that was in our last newsletter, and different things going on in the world, all related to criminal justice issues. So please get to know us, and we'd like to get to know you and support you in your work. I think people that do this work feel pretty isolated. There's not a lot of support. There's not a lot of funding. We haven't had a lot of research in the field to go to funders with, but we do have some, and we try to stick together and do a lot of work together nationally and internationally. So if you're someone who is interested in these issues, please let us know, because we'd like to know you. We have some ideas of how you can get started doing this type of work in your own community. We started what's called disability response teams, and we have a fact sheet on that talks about how you can set up a team of folks that are interested in this topic, that include law enforcement, attorneys, victim advocates, people with disabilities, that really can support long-term change in the community. We love that people do training, but it can't just be training. It has to be more about long-term solutions. Training is just the beginning. And then supporting people with IDD to get involved as well. Do they want to do, are they interested in crisis response? People with mental health disabilities are now doing co-response work. They're volunteering, or they're getting paid to do some crisis response. So how do we make sure people with IDD are involved in that? It should be people with lived experience really taking the lead in this, because they get it the most, especially if they've lived through anything with a police officer. That's the voices that we really want to elevate. So please, if you're listening and you have a disability and you want to get involved, let us know, because we love to connect people to their passions and really being able to speak up for what they really care about. So there's all different ways to get involved, and we'd love to have a conversation about making sure that everyone finds their kind of niche and how they want to do that.
And getting involved is so important. So important. And it's not just work. There can be joy and community and
yes,
and fun and excitement too. So thank you for telling us how to do that. And Leanne McKingsley, thank you very much for joining us here on Demand and Disrupt.
Thank you so much.
Demand and Disrupt is a production of the Advocado Press with generous support from the Center for Accessible Living based in Louisville, Kentucky. Our executive producers are me, Kimberly Parsley, and Dave Mathis. Our sound engineer is Michael Parsley. Thanks to Chris Ankin for the use of his song, Change. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And please consider leaving a review. You can find links to our email and social media in the show notes. Please reach out and let's keep the conversation going. Thanks, everyone.